Disability has long been the most overlooked and underrepresented minority group in Western media. There has been study after study showing a lack of mindfulness when disability is represented. It has gotten to the point when there is finally a single, mostly faithful representation in the character of Sheldon from The Big Bang Theory. People everywhere are eager to sing the praises of the effort and accuracy put into that one character. There have been countless movements such as Different Not Less, which are started by people who have the will to change the hurtful words that are so commonly used by both the ignorant and those who are purposefully hurtful. I seek to understand and support my friends and also strangers who live with disabilities through this research. Media has such a large amount of influence on our society, as well as it exists as a mirror for the values and interests of society. For these reasons, I have decided to dive into said media to investigate the representations of physical disabilities as well as neurodivergent disabilities. Works such as Representations of Autism in the Media, Perspectives in Popular Television Shows by Katie Dowdy, and articles written by people such as Lauren Applebaum of Respectability, and many more will be referenced here as they were a great help to my research. The main focus of my work will be to analyze and break down aforementioned representations of autism in the media, perspectives in popular television shows, and provide extra information and perspectives that reach outside of the scope Dowdy was working with. To begin, I will present the point of the study and initial thoughts presented. Dowdy wrote, "The purpose of this study was to examine how accurately autism was depicted in the media, specifically in television, when compared to the scientifically accepted definition. The two television shows that were examined in this study were The Big Bang Theory and Parenthood. 6 episodes of each show were analyzed by examiners to see how accurate the depictions of autism were across different types of situations and reactions. The content of the study opens with some disturbing information about the way that the media at large has handled certain disabilities over the years. J.K. Johnson's findings in The Visualization of the Twisted Tongue, Portrayals of Stuttering in Film, Television, and Comic Books, shows how stuttering in movies as of 2008 was for the most part just a tool used for humor, to show nervousness or weakness, and to deliver a villain or unlikable character. It is only after hearing something like that when one is typically forced to rethink the sorts of characters and stereotypes one has seen in the media over their lifetime. People like Johnson who write these sorts of works that bring to light the negative presentation of disabilities do the first part of that process for change, which is the acknowledgement that there is a problem. The second step is for more and more of the public to receive the information and seek to act on that information instead of remaining complacent with how the world is. This is how we get movements such as Different Not Less, and also the book with very similar name by Temple Grandin, where she provides stories from all kinds of people who were able to be successful either alongside of their disability or despite it, depending on the individual's perspective and situation. A large reason for my interest in Dowdy's research is the fact that she comes to a more positive conclusion for the two shows she analyzed and is able to highlight a couple of the very few positive instances of autism representation in media amongst the sea of negative. In doing this, she is still able to raise awareness for the issue, but she gets to play the part of providing some answers instead of just hammering home the problem alone. Dowdy saw the worthwhile work done by others to bring the problem to light, and she took the opportunity to provide adjacent work that could expand the conversation. Now I will shift to analyzing the data gathered by Dowdy. With the first instance of data, we were able to see the difference in the sheer quantity of research material available between the two sources. Out of the roughly 45-minute runtime of Parenthood, the viewer is only shown about 5 minutes of any characters with autism on screen. This is certainly not an issue with the show at all. We will come to see that the representation here is quite accurate and respectful. It just shows that The Big Bang Theory is a larger wealth of information for this particular study, with about 13 of its 20 minutes of runtime being dedicated to having a character with autism on screen. The first question asked by Dowdy in her research was if the portrayals of characters with autism in television lined up with the definition of autism provided by scientists. Dowdy wrote, "To answer that question, items from the coding sheet were matched with DSM-4 classifications. Those selected items were in the social interaction and restricted repetitive and stereotyped behavior, interests, and activities sections of the coding sheet." This chart shows the data collected from 32 scenes of The Big Bang Theory and how they relate to the characteristics decided upon by scientists. As one can see, there is only one missing from each category. But in the next chart, out of 403 possibilities for social interaction behaviors, 174 different behaviors were observed. At first, this chart makes it seem like having less than half of these present would be a negative strike against the show, but in reality, this is actually an impressive number across only 32 scenes analyzed. Despite Parenthood's much shorter amount of time spent with autism, it has a perfect 8 for 8 on DSM-IV characteristics, which shows its attention to detail and the care given to each moment on screen. The second question asked by Dowdy was if certain qualities of autism were presented more often than others in media. The following data sets show the experiment that was run on the scenes of the show to determine the frequency and presence of certain key traits. Again, this shows a fairly strong degree of accuracy in the portrayal of Sheldon's autism on screen. Imperfect for sure, but far more fair than is commonly seen on television. Lastly, I will now break down and provide a larger context to the results of Dowdy's study and form a conversation. My time spent with Dowdy's research was so focused on my topic of media representation of disability that after I had become fairly knowledgeable on the subject, I became curious about what voices in the community were saying in regards to the larger picture of disability in the West. And this led me to Elizabeth Guffey's book, Designing Disability. In the work, Guffey traces the inception of the idea creating access for the disabled through the ISA, the International Symbol of Access. She also proposes the notion that disability is a social construct, which is an example of a way of thinking and understanding naturally occurring human conditions. In her article titled, New Report Shows Lack of Representation of People with Disabilities in Film, Lauren Applebaum reports that, quote, only 2.4% of all speaking or named characters in film were shown to have a disability in 2015, end quote. The main reason this is shocking and something to be discussed is the number of Americans with disabilities in 2015 was about 20% of the population. Within this statistic of 2.4%, 81% of those characters were male, which means only 19% were female. These are the sorts of data statistics I guessed were out there, but I was not fully aware of the scale. One more step in this study shows that 71% of the characters depicted with disabilities were white, which left 28% to be represented from all other racial and ethnic groups. Quote, disability is the largest minority group in America and is the only minority group that people can join at any time due to accident, illness, or aging, end quote. Despite the literal accessibility of the community, disability has remained largely stigmatized and marginalized in the media due to restrictive stereotypes and lack of visibility in society. Through Dowdy's research in the realm of television, I've been able to see some positive data that shows we are able to change and society is able to create healthy representations of disability. Not to take away from the problem, though, there is still much work to be done. It is simply now the case that we have a couple of examples to look to and try to surpass as well. Despite the two depictions being fair and accurate, they are both white men. This does not deteriorate their individual value, but it does limit the reach of their relatability as they are some of the only major figures for people to relate to on TV. This all goes to say that we can appreciate a step in the right direction while simultaneously acknowledging the long road still ahead of us and not being satisfied with the work already done. There is still so much wide open space that has been unoccupied as far as great disability representation in media goes. Hopefully, shows and movies will come out in the future that build upon the foundations set by The Big Bang Theory and Parenthood, while also being more diverse.